All right, I'm going to go over how to build an error analysis in Numbers. I'm going to skip around on a few parts here and kind of stop and fast forward some things, but for the most part, this should give you everything that you need to know. All right, so the first thing is to figure out how many questions you have and how many students you're going to be assessing. Um, Across the top, I usually do the number of questions, and then on the side, we would do the roster of students. So here you'd be writing their names, and here we'd be writing something about the topic for the question. So I'm going to go ahead and pause this and kind of fill in those names and numbers just so you don't have to watch that whole thing. But just as a tip, if you need to expand, if you need to add more rows, you can drag here. And if you need to add more columns, you can do so here. Okay. So I'm going to pause this and go ahead and get that set up. Okay, now here I've got it set up. I just have a roster in place and I have this set up for 25 questions. The next thing that I'm going to do is add a row on top here so that I can put the topics for each question in. So I might write something like predict and verify. Maybe the next one is preview. I'm going to go ahead and do this for the rest of this row as well. So let me pause this. Okay, now that that's set up, the next thing I want to do is start to set up my cells so that I can make them drop-down boxes to choose when students choose an incorrect answer. So I'm going to go ahead and click in the first cell, and I'm going to go over here to Format, Cell, and I want to make this be a pop-up menu. Now I want to start with the first item as in I want there to be a default, and I want the default answer to be that they got it correct. And then let's say if it's a multiple choice test and they have 4 choices in A, B, C, D, you would just add those in. So add a new item, and so on. And so with this cell, whenever I click on it, I should get a drop down, A, B, C, D, and it's going to stay on correct automatically. So if you hover over it, you're going to get these yellow circles. So I'm just going to drag that down to fill the rest of the column, and I'm going to drag it across to fill the rest of the rows. So now everyone is set as default. So if a student gets 100 on theirs, you don't have to change anything in that student's row. All right, next I want to give myself a couple extra rows so I can have some room to calculate some formulas. So I'm just going to drag an extra row here. And it's going to go ahead and autofill that. So I want this row to be blank. And I'm going to give myself just a few more rows. Okay, now in this row, I want to calculate the number correct. I want to calculate the number of students that chose A, those that chose B, those that chose C, and I also want to count the number of students that chose D. Okay. So in this column, this is where it gets kind of tricky. I'm going to click in the cell and press the equals sign, and that's going to give me the option to plug in a formula. And the formula that I'm going to use is count if, as in it's going to count something if it meets a certain criteria. So I'm going to click that. And test array is what it's asking me, what section do you want me to count? So I want it to count this column. And in this column, the condition is what do you want me to look for? So I'm going to click on that. And I'm going to open quotation marks, equal sign, and the thing I want it to look for is if something is marked as correct. And then I'm going to close quotation marks. And I'm going to go ahead and copy that formula because I'm going to use something similar to it again. And then I'm going to press the check mark. Okay, so it's counting right now. There's 16 correct answers in that column. So if I change one of these to A, it drops to 15. Okay, but I'm going to go ahead and undo that. And next, I'm going to do the same thing with the yellow circle. I want this same formula to be applied in all of these columns, so I'm going to drag it all the way to the edge. And I'm going to go ahead and just pick a random column and test. So if I change the letter here, see how that drops to 15, and I'll just choose another one so that only 14 are correct. Okay, so I know the formula is working. Next thing I'm going to do is in this same column, I want to figure out how many times they've chosen the letter A or the answer A. So I'm going to paste that same formula that I had before, but instead of making it looking for correct, I want to choose anytime they've picked the answer A. So So I'm going to check that. So right now it says 0, so I'm going to go ahead and test it. If I check A here, the correct drops to 15 and A goes up to 1, so that's what I want. I'm going to do the same thing, drag this out to the other columns, and go ahead and test it. So let me just check a random one here. That looks good. I'm going to do the same thing here, equal sign, paste that same formula, but instead of saying correct, I want it to search for B. I'm going to drag that out. Same thing here, equal sign, paste the formula. I want it to search for C's. And same thing here one more time. I want this one to search for D's. Okay, and I'm going to drag this out here. And I'm just going to choose a few random letters all over the page just to make sure it's working. So I'm going to choose an A here, B here, C here, and a D here. And I'll just check each of those columns. So I should have one A there, got that. Got one B there, got one C here, and one D there. So my formula looks like it's good. And I'm just going to reset this by dragging these so those distractors go away. Next thing I'm going to do is calculate a couple of averages. So I'm going to make this column the average. Now this is going to be the, or actually this will probably be the, instead of correct, we'll do percent correct. So this is going to be the percent correct for question number 1. So a good way to calculate a formula like that is to press the equal sign, and I just want this right here, that whatever is showing up in that box divided by 16. So right now it's a 1, so I'm going to change the format of it because it's doing a number. I want it to be a percentage. So right now it shows 100%. And the reason that works is just taking their 16 answers, so 16 out of 16 is 100. If I drop one of these to something else, now 93% of the class got it, or 94% got it correct. Drop again, 87% get it correct. Okay? And I'm going to take that same formula and I'm going to drag it out for the rest of the columns and check these to make sure that it's still working. So that one changes, no, the other ones change. This one changes, so that formula is working. Okay. Something else I'm going to do is I've got the percentage correct for each question. I also would like to see the percentage correct for each student. So I'm going to write student averages in here. And I'm going to get rid of that formula that's currently in there. And what I can do here is I can do that same count if formula. So I want it to count it if, and then the range I want it to check is this student's whole row. And then the condition I want is if correct is there. Now right now it's going to say 25, okay? So I want to alter that formula. And I want to take that number, so this is giving me the number 25. I want to divide that by 25. So to get the division sign, I just press the slash next to the right shift key. So I'm going to divide that by 25. So now we have the number 1. I'm going to change that to a percentage. So format, cell, percentage. And now I have my percent here. So Steve right now has 25 correct answers. If I make one of them incorrect, he drops to a 96. If another one is incorrect, should drop to a 92. Okay, so that formula is working. And I'm going to do the same thing with this formula and just drag it down for the rest of the students. And every time you do a formula, always good to just check and make sure it's working with other people or other rows or other columns. So that dropped to a 96, that dropped to a 92, so I know that's working. Okay, you might notice over here I've got this one that says 0%. I want this to be the, for me, I want to do the average, the student averages. So what I'm going to do is just I'm going to take that and delete what's there now, equal sign, and I just want to get the average. And the range that I want it to calculate is all of these. So I'm going to check that. And so right now the average is 100. So what should happen is if I change a couple of these to something else, so the student's average drops to a 96, and then the class average drops to a 99.75. I'll do one more random one. Student average drops to 96, class average 99.5. Okay, so I know those are working and the whole class average is working as well. Okay, so next thing I'm going to do is set up a few graphs. Before I do that, I like to choose several different incorrect answers that the variance and those being correct and incorrect will show me different things to look for in the charts to make sure that the charts are working correctly. If everything says correct, you might not know if your charts have a problem just because you can't really see the difference in the bars the way you would if you have some incorrect answers there. So I'm just going to choose some of those at random. All right, so the first thing I want to do is get a distractor analysis. So I want to count up the correct answers versus the incorrect answers that were chosen the most frequently. So I'm going to go up here to Chart, go to Interactive, and I'm going to choose this interactive bar graph. Now it's going to ask me, do you want to add the chart data? So I'm going to click that, and then I'm just going to drag all of these rows and columns that give me that data. Okay, and then I'm going to press done and start to look at it. So let's see if this looks like it's telling me what I want it to. So for number 1, which is a predict and verify question, this many students got it correct, and the incorrect answer chosen most frequently was choice A. So I'm going to scroll through a few of these to make sure that they match. 2, I had 100%. On number 3, I should have 81%. And then the most commonly incorrect distractor was choice B. And I can kind of scroll through here and just look at a few different ones. I would like to take a look at number 23 because I noticed there's a low average there. So we've got 20, 21, 22, 23. Okay, this many were correct. This is the most popular distractor, so that graph looks good. All right, next I'm just going to put a simple bar graph that is all of the percentage correct for each question. So same thing, I'm going to go to add a chart. I'm just going to do a regular 2D graph, bar graph. I'm going to bring this up here. And I'm also going to widen this out because it's going to have 25 bars on it. So I'm going to add the chart data, and I would just want this one row. So I'm just going to drag here and select the whole row. And I just would like to do it by columns just so I can get the colors in there. Now I don't like this legend the way that it is, so I'm going to select my graph, go up here to Format, unclick the legend, go over to the axis, go to X-axis, and I'm going to check this box series name, so I'll get all the names of the questions, but then I'm going to change the label angles to right diagonal, and now I can see all of them. So this is just really useful to see right here. You can see for each one how the students did on it. So I can see predict and verify number 23. That's this bar. That's one they struggled with right here. Same topic, predicting and verifying number 13. Low average there. Okay. So this graph looks all set. I'm going to add one more graph. That's just a graph of all the student averages. So go up here, chart, graph. I'm going to drag this out. I'm going to add my data. And this is the column that I want. And I also want the class average too here. I'm going to click done. And I'll make those same changes I did with the other graph, changing the legend and the series names. Okay, so I made those same changes just so I can see the students clearly. And so this is just really helpful to see easily. This student didn't do as well, this student didn't do as well, these two did very well, and so on. So that's just a quick run through of how to set up an error analysis in numbers and how to build charts based off of that. I hope that's helpful.